Hi everyone, I'm here to talk a little bit about Evans Pritchard. You can see the outline in front of you. 2 pages worth, plus some terms that I will cover in the lecture. So, there's some debate about whether or not we should include Evans Pritchard as a theorist of religion. He was actually a person who took an eclectic approach to religion. He used aspects of other theories, but he was not dogmatically committed to any of them. You can see echoes of the intellectualist theory and the sociological theory and some innovative ideas in his work. But he didn't actually found his own school. However, his approach to religion was quite distinctive for its time. And one thing that he was a big advocate for was he said, if we want to understand a religion, we really need detailed knowledge about it. And he thought knowledge gained through field work, through ethnographic field work, was the best kind of knowledge because it was based on firsthand experience with the people who were believing and practicing things in that religion. And that doing field work enabled the researcher to see how people think and behave in real-world situations. So this is as opposed to reading about people or kind of skimming the surface of a religion. He thought you had to jump in with both feet and really immerse yourself in the daily life of people who were believing and practicing that religion. And he was working at a time in anthropology where there were a lot of ideas floating around that he found very questionable. And so one of those was this idea of the primitive mentality. In EP's, for short, EP's day, Evans Pritchard's day, early to mid 1900s, there were a lot of scholars who were worried about this question, do modern and so-called primitive people think in different ways? And at that time, it was still acceptable to talk about people as primitive, as if they had an inferior culture to a European or an American culture. Those were the terms that people used at that time. And Tyler and the intellectualists, they said, yes, all people are rational. However, it may be true that modern people have more knowledge than primitive people. But that does not mean that primitive people were irrational. They were still rational people. Okay, so he believed in the unity or the equality of all people when it comes to rationality. He did not, however, believe that all people knew the same things or had the same amount of information about things. And this was an alternative view that it was opposed to a French sociologist named Lévi-Bruhl, and he had argued for some time that primitive people had their own mentality, what he called the primitive mentality. And he thought that the primitive mentality was what he called mystical. And what he meant by that was anything that concerned the immediate contact with the sacred. And he thought a mystical mentality was the main thing that marked this primitive, so-called primitive mentality. So he argued, Lévi-Bruhl that is, argued that primitive people, through religion, typically seek to break down the boundaries between themselves and supernatural forces, and that they believe that it's possible to have a direct, simultaneous equation between a person and a supernatural being. Lévi-Bruhl called the idea that humans can have this mystical unity with the supernatural as mystical participation. Again, a hallmark, according to him, of a so-called primitive mentality. And Lévi-Bruhl cites a lot of examples, but one he cites is an encounter between a German explorer and a Bororo man in the Amazon. And the German reported that in their interactions, the Bororo man said, "I am a red parakeet." Okay, now let's be clear. Lévi-Bruhl is reading a report by a German explorer about his experiences in the Amazon. And this man says, "I am a red parakeet." And Lévi-Bruhl says that any modern rational person can see that a man can't be a red parakeet. But in the primitive mind, he said, there's no contradiction there, because they think that there can be mystical participation or union between people and things like red parakeets, or in this case, the red parakeet is a supernatural creature to the Bororo people. But the point is the same no matter what. He said they believe they can have mystical participation between people and sacred or supernatural things. And this example was later very heavily criticized. Even the German explorer himself realized that the Bororo man statement could have several meanings. So, for example, he admitted that the man statement might simply mean that he was a member of the Red Parakeet clan, because clans were often named after animals or other things in nature. So that has nothing to do with religion. It's simply a statement of identity with a particular clan. And E.P. was critical in another way. He accepted the idea that different groups of people have different worldviews, of course. However, he felt that Levi-Bruhl didn't know enough about the Bororo language to know what was meant by "I am a red parakeet." So the "am" in the statement could have a metaphorical meaning. He also argued that Levi-Bruhl was guilty of taking statements out of context. And Evans Pritchard said that once one understands the whole worldview in the context of these statements, one sees that they are not contradictions, and that there is no distinct primitive mentality here. E.P. argued that people everywhere are equally rational. However, culture and religion condition people to see the world in terms of different worldviews. And a worldview, again, is an all-encompassing set of basic propositions about the world. And Evans Pritchard argued that all worldviews are equally rational. What distinguishes them is that each is built on a different foundation of basic assumptions. On these basic assumptions, people build the rest of the worldview. So according to him, the worldview is internally rational because it's based on basic foundations or propositions or assumptions that people make. Now, Evans Pritchard is not saying that all worldviews are equally accurate. He did believe that some worldviews match reality better than others. However, he argued that all worldviews are rational in the sense that they follow a logical order once the basic assumptions are accepted as true. Okay, so to review, different basic assumptions are the foundation for different worldviews. According to Evans Pritchard, all worldviews are equally rational, though some might match reality more than others. And he concludes there is no distinct primitive mentality that separates so-called primitive people from modern people. There are only different worldviews. Now here, I want to pause and just say that one place where this discussion sometimes gets tripped up is on the question of the term rational. And people use the term rational in a lot of different ways, in everyday language as well as in scholarship. Sometimes people use the term rational to mean you understand the way the world works, or you understand facts, or you're knowledgeable, or whatever. Sometimes we just use rational as a tool in an argument. Well, you're not being rational, kind of an accusation or a criticism. But in philosophy and in parts of anthropology and other social sciences that deal with these matters, we use rational in a different way. And so Evans Pritchard is using rational to mean follows in a logical order, is internally consistent. So when he says that primitive people, in his view, primitive, are rational, what he means is that once their basic assumptions are understood, the other things they believe are also comprehensible or sensible. They're rational because they're consistent internally. So he doesn't mean rational in terms of they understand every last fact about the way the world works. He means rational in an internal sense. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. That's the end of the first part of the lecture on Evans Pritchard. Take a moment and move on eventually when you're ready to the second part. Thank you.